Evan, a human engineer, waking on a cold metal floor inside an unknown ship. His head spins, alarms echo in the distance. As his blurred vision clears, he sees two alien females, a mother and daughter, quietly sitting beside him, watching him with glowing silver eyes. They whisper in a language he cannot understand. The mother looks worried, the daughter looks curious. Evan tries to speak, but his voice cracks. The alien mother gently places 2 fingers on his forehead, and everything around him vibrates. Evan realizes he is not restrained, but he is too weak to stand. The alien mother, Seria, uses a translation device to speak. "You should not be awake yet, human. The others did not survive." Her words hit him like a shock. He demands to know where the rest of his crew is, but she does not answer. The ship shakes violently. Red lights flash. Seria shields her daughter, Lena, and pulls Evan behind a wall as something slams against the hull. Seria whispers, "They found us, stay silent." Evan hears metallic claws scraping on the ship's exterior. Something is hunting them. Seria reveals that they rescued Evan from the wreckage of a human transport ship. They were not the ones who attacked him. She explains that a predator Hive-Swarm, a ruthless alien species that feeds on life energy, attacked both humans and her people. Now the Hive-Swarm is tracking the survivors, Seria, Lena and Evan. Welcome to my channel Sci-Fi Love Story. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. When Evan opened his eyes, he felt heavy as if someone had placed a great weight on his chest, and for a moment he could not remember where he was or even who he was. Then shapes began to form in his blurry vision, and he realized he was lying on a cold metal floor inside a strange room that hummed with a soft low sound. He slowly lifted his head, and that was when he saw them, an alien mother and her daughter, sitting right next to him, their eyes glowing silver in the dim blue light. The mother was tall, with smooth pale skin that shone like wet stone, her dark hair falling in long waves behind her, while the daughter looked younger, smaller, with curious bright eyes that followed every small move he made. Evan felt a flash of fear, but also a strange warmth because they were not threatening him. They were just watching him with worried faces. He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and weak, and the mother leaned closer, placing 2 gentle fingers on his forehead, and he felt a soft vibration like a warm wave running through his body. Then the mother spoke in a soft voice, although he did not understand the words at first. She used a small crystal device that glowed in her hand, and the words shifted into something he could understand. She told him he should not be awake, yet she said the others did not survive. Those words hit him hard, and he felt panic rising in his chest. He asked where his crew was, but the mother only lowered her head and said she was sorry before she could say more. The room shook violently, as if something huge had slammed into the outside of the ship. Red light flashed from the ceiling, and a deep alarm began to echo through the hall. The mother pulled her daughter close and told Evan to stay silent. She lifted her hand, and a shimmering shield formed around them, and Evan heard a terrible scraping sound on the other side of the hull, like metal claws dragging across it. The daughter whispered a word in fear, and Evan could guess that something deadly was searching for them. The mother finally told him her name was Seria and her daughter was Lena, and that they were not his enemies. She said they had rescued him from the wreck of his human transport ship. She explained that a predator Hive-Swarm had attacked both their ship and his, and the Hive-Swarm hunted life for energy and followed any trace of survivors, while they both fled the same attackers. Evan felt shock and fear, but he saw the truth in their eyes. They were also victims, not monsters. Seria showed him a small hologram of the attack, bright lights, sharp shapes, and explosions. He saw humans and aliens both being hunted by strange, fast creatures with jagged limbs and glowing faces. He felt sick watching it, but it made everything clear. Seria told him their ship was damaged and falling apart, and they had no one else to help them. She said she had saved him because he was the only human left alive nearby, and she hoped he might help them escape. Evan pushed himself upright. Even though his body ached, he told her he would help, and Seria gave a small nod of relief. Lena smiled nervously at him, and he felt a bit of comfort. Then he asked about the condition of the ship, and she guided him to a broken panel in the wall. Sparks flew from the wires, and the engine made a terrible grinding sound that echoed through the chambers. Evan knelt down, examined it, and realized the engine was seconds from melting down. He told Seria that they needed to reroute the power and stabilize the core, or the ship would explode. She looked at him with fear, but she trusted him. The ship shook again, and a loud crack sounded above them. Pieces of metal fell to the floor, and the scraping outside got louder, as if the Hive-Swarm creatures were pulling the hull apart to get inside. Evan worked quickly, grabbing tools from a nearby shelf, his hands trembling as he cut wires and reconnected them. The heat from the engine made sweat drip down his face, Seria took position near the door, her shield glowing bright. As she prepared to fight off anything that entered, Lena stayed close to Evan, handing him tools and begging him to hurry. The humming of the engine changed pitch, growing louder and more unstable. Evan knew he had only seconds left before everything went wrong. He shouted that the core was overloading and that they needed to brace themselves. Seria grabbed Lena and pulled her close. The hull split open behind them, and darkness filled the room as creatures with jagged glowing bodies began to crawl in, their eyes bright like burning stars. They screeched a terrible sound. The engine roared with rising heat. Evan slammed his hand on the final switch, hoping his plan would work, and in the next moment, a blinding white flash burst through the room. The ship tilted violently, gravity shifting. As everything was pulled in every direction, Evan felt Seria trying to reach for him. But the force was too strong. His vision turned white. And then everything went silent, everything went cold, and everything disappeared as darkness swallowed him again, and he had no idea if he would ever open his eyes again, or if the alien mother and daughter had survived the blast, or if the Hive-Swarm had claimed them all. But before the last of his thoughts faded, he heard a soft voice calling his name somewhere far away, like Lena, trying to hold on to him in the final moment, before the void closed around him completely. When Evan opened his eyes again, he felt a dull pain in his head, and his body felt heavy as if he had been pulled from deep water. He blinked slowly, and saw dim light flickering across rough stone walls. He was no longer on the damaged ship. Instead, he was lying on a soft bed made of strange woven leaves inside a cave that smelled of clean air and cool earth. As his senses returned, he heard two soft voices near him. He turned his head and saw Seria and Lena sitting at his side, their faces filled with relief when they saw he was awake. Lena reached out and grabbed his hand with both of hers, and told him that he had saved them. She said the engine blast had pushed the Hive-Swarm away, and Seria had shielded them as the ship fell from the sky. Seria explained that she used the last energy in her shield to protect them during the crash, but she had no strength left afterward, so they dragged Evan out of the wreck before it exploded. Evan could not believe he was alive, and he was shocked to see that Seria had injuries, glowing cracks on her arms and across her shoulder, showing that her energy shield had been pushed too far. Lena also looked tired and hurt, but she still smiled at him even in fear and exhaustion. Evan sat up slowly, feeling weak and thirsty. Seria handed him a cup made of crystal with water that tasted sweet and cool. He drank it, and felt his strength returning. She told him the Hive-Swarm was still searching the area, and they had to stay quiet or the creatures would find them. The cave was part of an old tunnel system used long ago by her people, but it was unstable and very dangerous. The walls trembled sometimes, and strange sounds echoed through the darkness. Evan asked how long he had been unconscious, and Lena told him it had been 2 cycles, which he guessed meant hours. The moment he stood up, pain shot through his leg, but he ignored it. He said they needed a plan to escape before the Hive-Swarm surrounded the entire area. Seria nodded, and told him there was an emergency beacon outside the cave, but it was damaged in the crash and needed repairs. If activated, it would call her people to rescue them, but she warned that the Hive-Swarm queen was near and would sense the energy spike. Evan knew he had to take the risk because staying in the cave meant death. He asked what parts were needed, and Seria pointed to a pile of scrap from the ship. Evan searched through the broken pieces, wires and metal plates, until he found the small crystal power cell that still held energy, but it was cracked and unstable. Seria told him it might explode if overloaded. Evan held it in his hands and stared at the veins of light running through it. He said it was their only chance. Lena watched him with trust in her eyes, and Evan felt a strange warmth, because she believed in him, even though they barely knew each other. He knelt down and began to work using torn cables, stone tools, and broken ship parts to create a pulse emitter. He said it would stun the Hive-Swarm long enough for them to reach the emergency beacon. Seria watched him with surprise, saying she had never seen a human think and build so fast. Evan smiled weakly and said humans were good at fixing things when they had no choice. The cave suddenly shook. A low growl echoed from deeper inside, and Lena gasped. Seria stood up, her shield glowing softly again. Although very weak, she whispered that the Hive-Swarm was coming. Evan worked fast to his hands, shaking as he connected the last pieces. And finally the device hummed with faint light. He told Seria and Lena to stand behind him as he held the emitter toward the dark tunnel, and then the creatures appeared, their glowing bodies sliding across the stone, their limbs scraping loudly. One of them shrieked and charged toward them. Evan pressed the trigger, and a powerful shockwave burst from the emitter, shaking the cave and knocking dust and rocks down the walls. The creatures screamed as the wave hit them, and they stumbled back stunned. Evan grabbed Lena and shouted for Seria to move as they ran through the cave tunnels. The ground shook behind them as the Hive-Swarm recovered and chased them. The tunnels twisted in many directions, and Evan followed Seria's guidance as she used her fading energy to light the way. They finally reached the cave exit, and bright sunlight hit them, making Evan squint. The emergency beacon stood outside, half buried in dirt and metal shards. The device was cracked, and silent Evan rushed to it, lifting the cover, and seeing damaged circuits, he pushed the pulse emitter into the beacon slot. Hoping it could power it, Seria warned him again that it was unstable, but Evan said they had no choice. Suddenly a huge shadow fell over them, and the Hive-Swarm queen landed in front of the cave, her massive body covered in jagged spikes, her glowing eyes burning with hunger. Her roar shook the ground, and Lena screamed as the queen crawled closer. Seria pushed Lena behind her and raised her shield, but it flickered weakly. Evan stood between them all, and the queen, even though his body trembled with fear, he shouted at them to get behind the beacon. Then he grabbed the cracked power cell with both hands as it pulsed dangerously. He slammed it into the beacon core. The beacon lit up with a blinding surge of light, and energy exploded outward in a shockwave. The queen screeched and stumbled back as the blast tore through the air. Evan felt the force throw him to the ground, and everything shook. The sky seemed to ripple like water. Then the beacon shot a pillar of blue light into the sky, and Evan knew the rescue signal had been activated. He tried to stand, but his legs felt numb and he could barely breathe. Seria and Lena crawled to him, supporting him as the Hive-Swarm queen roared in rage. But she no longer came near. The beacon light forced her back, and the sound of distant engines filled the sky as a large crystalline ship descended through the clouds. Seria whispered that her people had arrived. The queen screeched and vanished into the shadows as the alien ship landed gently. Warriors with shining armor rushed out, forming a protective circle around them. They bowed to Seria and then looked at Evan with awe and respect. Seria told them that Evan had saved her daughter, saved her, and helped defend them against the Hive-Swarm. Lena held Evan's hand tightly, tears in her eyes. As she looked at him with gratitude, the warriors lifted Evan carefully and took them all on board the ship. Inside, the air was warm and filled with soft light. Evan felt a wave of peace wash over him. Seria placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and told him that he had a place among them now, that he was no longer just a human survivor, but someone who had shown courage, heart and strength beyond anything they expected. Lena smiled shyly at him, and Evan felt something new, a quiet bond forming between them. As the ship rose into the sky, leaving the destroyed valley behind, he looked out at the alien horizon, glowing with colors he had never seen, and he knew his life had changed forever. He was no longer alone, and he had saved 2 lives who would never forget him. And in that moment, as the ship carried them toward a new world, Evan felt hope rising in him again, as bright as the stars above him. As the crystalline ship carried Evan, Seria and Lena away from the ruined valley, he felt the soft hum of its engines rise through the floor like a gentle heartbeat. The interior glowed with warm, shifting colors that moved like slow water across the smooth walls. And Evan found himself staring around, amazed at how peaceful everything felt after the terror of the Hive-Swarm attack. He sat on a floating seat made from energy that shaped itself to hold his weight, while Seria and Lena stayed close on either side, protecting him from the curious gazes of the crew members who whispered among themselves about the human who had saved their leaders and lived through something that should have killed him countless times. Seria placed a hand on his shoulder and told him he was safe now, though her voice held a soft sadness. Evan asked why she seemed worried, and she explained that while he had saved them, he had also drawn the attention of the Hive-Swarm queen in a way no human or alien had ever done before. The queen would not forget a human who challenged her and survived, and she would hunt again. Evan felt a chill, but he nodded, saying he understood that danger was not over. But Seria told him there was more. She said that once they reached her homeworld, a council would decide what to do with Evan, because humans were almost unknown to her people, and she feared the council might keep him under watch or prevent him from returning to human space for his own safety. Lena grabbed his arm and said she would not let anyone hurt him or lock him away, and Evan managed a small smile, because despite everything he had gone through, he felt comfort in her fierce devotion. The ship continued its flight through the silent skies until it reached orbit, and Evan saw their world for the first time, a giant glowing sphere, swirling with silver clouds and bright rivers of blue light flowing across its surface like living veins. Seria told him the name of their planet meant cradle of the first dawn, and Evan felt humbled as the ship descended through shimmering clouds, revealing forests of crystal trees that shone like frozen lightning and great towers that curved and twisted like growing vines. The landing platform glowed softly as the ship touched down, and a path of light formed, leading them forward. Evan stepped onto the ground, feeling its strange, smooth texture beneath his boots, and a welcoming breeze brushed his face, as if the planet itself was greeting him. As they walked, a group of armored guards approached them, bowing to Seria, and then lowering their heads toward Evan, though their faces showed curiosity and caution. Seria introduced Evan as their savior, and the guards guided them through a large gate that opened like a blooming flower, revealing a vast hall, filled with floating sculptures, glowing pools, and hundreds of people who looked at Evan with wide eyes, some whispering. Others stepping back in surprise. Lena stayed close, clinging softly to his arm to make sure he felt safe, and Evan noticed the pride in her eyes as she walked beside him. Saria led them to a high platform, where the council of elders waited seated in a circle of hovering seats, their robes shimmering like shifting stars. The elders looked ancient, wise, and calm, each studying Evan with deep interest. The head elder rose and asked Saria to explain everything she had seen and endured. Saria spoke, clearly telling the story of the Hive-Swarm attack, the fall of the ship, and how Evan had saved them more than once. She spoke of his courage, his quick thinking, and how he risked his life to protect Lena, even when he had barely known them. Evan felt himself growing warm with embarrassment as everyone listened. But Lena proudly lifted her chin, adding that Evan was brave, kind, and someone they should honor, not fear. The elders whispered among themselves, and the head elder finally turned to Evan, asking him what he wished. Evan hesitated, thinking of his lost crew, his home, and everything familiar, yet he also thought of Saria, of Lena, of their kindness, and how they had risked their lives for him. He told the council he wanted safety for humans and Saria's people, and that he wanted to stand with them against the Hive-Swarm threat. He said he had no world to return to now, but he hoped he could help protect theirs. The hall fell silent, and for a moment Evan feared his words would be rejected. But then the head elder lowered his head in respect and declared that Evan would be welcomed not as a captive, but as an honored guardian and guest. Lena let out a happy gasp and hugged him tightly, surprising everyone, including Evan, who laughed softly as she squeezed him. The moment did not last long, however, because a loud alarm echoed through the hall. The shimmering walls darkened, and the elders stood quickly. Saria grabbed Evan's arm and whispered that the Hive-Swarm had followed them to the planet. The head elder ordered the shield to activate, and the entire sky above them shimmered as a massive energy dome formed around the city, but something struck it from the outside, shaking the ground beneath them. Evan felt fear twist in his chest as he realized the Hive-Swarm queen was stronger than they thought. He looked to Saria, who nodded at him, silently asking if he was ready, and Evan knew he could not step back now. The elders ordered all civilians to seek shelter, and the warriors rushed outside, preparing their weapons, which glowed with sharp energy points. Evan asked Saria what they could do, and Saria said they needed to reach the main shield core beneath the city. If they could strengthen the barrier, they might push the Hive-Swarm back. But the core was old and needed guidance from someone who understood human-style power logic. Evan realized he was the only one with that knowledge, so the three of them ran through glowing corridors, down spiraling ramps, and into a huge chamber filled with pulsing blue crystals. The shield core hummed weakly and sparks flew from its side. Evan inspected the controls, his mind racing as he tried to understand the alien technology. He noticed patterns similar to the pulse emitter he built earlier, and he got an idea. He told Saria to bring him the cracked power cell from before, the one still holding unstable energy. Saria hesitated, saying it could explode, but Evan said it was their last chance. Lena handed it to him, and Evan placed it into an auxiliary slot on the shield core. He connected wires and twisted conduits while warning them to step back. Then he activated the link. The room filled with blinding light. The shield dome above the city expanded and strengthened, and the Hive-Swarm creatures screamed in frustration outside. But the power was too much. The crystals started to crack, and Evan knew it was going to blow. He shouted for Saria and Lena to run, but Lena refused to leave him. Saria dragged her away just as the crystal burst with a wave of raw energy. Evan's body was thrown back, and everything blurred into white light, but he felt no pain, only warmth, as if something was holding him safely. When he woke minutes later, he found himself lying in Saria's arms, her eyes glowing with relief. Lena knelt beside him, crying and laughing at the same time. Outside, the shield dome shone brighter than ever, driving the Hive-Swarm queen away, and the threat faded into the distance. The head elder announced that Evan had once again saved their world, and this time not only Saria and Lena bowed to him, but the entire council and every warrior present. Lena hugged him tightly, telling him she would never let him stand alone again. Saria smiled gently, her eyes warm with respect and something deeper. As the city lights rose around them, Evan realized he had become more than a survivor, more than a hero. He had become part of a new world, a new family, and a future that was now forever tied to the stars above them.